Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 2024 version of the REACH Forum. This is the annual forum hosted by IWSCC to bring together the incredible entrepreneurial supplier community, represented by many people with disabilities, and our corporate partners who are all committed to diversifying their supply chains and bringing the disabled community into their business operations. Today, we have a great setup. We're going to have some mixture of keynotes, government representatives. We're going to have supplier sessions. We're going to have corporate sessions. And together, I think it's going to send a really good message to our community as to what we're all about. So I want to kick it off right now. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to start with some welcome remarks from the Government of Canada, as represented by Alex Yeglich. He is our procurement ombudsman for Canada, appointed by the Government of Canada, and a longtime lawyer. And he's been in the procurement space for a long time, one way or the other, which has set him up perfectly for the role that he's in now. I believe you're based in Ottawa, Alex, and
Yes.
Lives here with his family. Went to school in Carleton. Went to school in Cornell, went to school in Chicago, very well-educated person, and a great start for us for today's event. Thank you again, and welcome, Alex.
Thank you so much. Bonjour. Welcome to this year's National Forum for Disabled Entrepreneurship. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that I am, in fact, joining you from Ottawa, which sits on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. It's a real privilege to be with you and provide more exposure to your talents and make sure that they're recognized and maximized. The theme of this year's forum is reaching real results. Real results means to me something more than just words and good feelings, but it actually means accountability and action. So you need to assess what has happened in concrete terms since the last time that you gathered to determine if things are actually moving in a positive direction. So my role as the procurement ombudsman requires me to hold people accountable and promote fairness. I want you to achieve real results, and I want to hear about your successes, but also your failures. We often can't achieve success without failure, and not enough people talk about that. You need to understand why you failed so that you can improve. My life has been filled with failure, but you can't let yourself live in that space. Let your failures serve as your catapult to success, and let your inner self shine and always be proud. So over the years, the IWSCC has become a vital collaborator with my office. You've participated in summits to help diversify the federal supply chain and provided insightful feedback to ensure our office continually enhances the inclusivity of our services and events. There are many failures along the way, and your direct and constructive feedback was always appreciated, and we were able to grow together. I also have been a guest on your podcast, which was an honor to share and promote the powerful voice of this community and share my personal experiences with disability. I've been the procurement ombudsman since 2018, and one of the things I'm most proud of is the work that we've done on diversity and inclusion. For starters, diversity is one of my office's 5 core pillars, and it remains the heart of the organization. You basically can't work at our organization unless you care about diversity and inclusion. Since 2018, we've been hosting Diversifying the Federal Supply Chain Summits. What I like most about these summits is the opportunity to meet businesses just like yourselves and hear your stories firsthand and learn more about how I can help you directly. What I know is that companies that are owned by people with disabilities are typically small and medium-sized businesses, and most common barriers that are faced when entering the federal supply chain is the lack of clarity on the process, understanding how to participate. As the procurement ombudsman, my team and I are here to highlight those problems, but also more importantly, push for changes to create a more fair, transparent, and open system so that companies like yours will actually win federal government contracts. I can't emphasize enough the importance of breaking down these barriers, because the more suppliers that we have that are diverse in nature, the richer the supply chain becomes for everyone, and that benefits everyone. I'd like to give a specific shout out to Procurement Assistance Canada, who's probably on this call, whose mandate is to help small and medium-sized businesses with the process of doing business with the federal government. So if you're considering doing business with the federal government, please reach out to them. They really do an excellent job at walking suppliers through the process. And please never hesitate to reach out to my office if you encounter any challenges or difficulties when participating in the federal procurement process. The government would be lucky to work with such a talented, innovative, and determined group of business people such as yourselves. Now I'll speak directly to various groups. If you're a disabled entrepreneur, your journey is invaluable to the fabric of the business community. Don't take no for an answer and keep succeeding, and don't forget, I'm here to lend a hand. If you're a purchaser, keep in mind that companies led by individuals with disabilities are adaptive and creative. So when navigating a world that isn't designed for your needs, innovation isn't just a skill set, it becomes a way of life. Leverage that. If you're an advocate or ally, keep working to reduce barriers and promote inclusivity for all. So today's forum is really a platform for sharing your personal success stories. If you've already achieved a success, that's fantastic, but I'd encourage you to open the door for others and support them in their journey. And if you fail, don't give up and find a mentor who has achieved success and let them open the door for you. Lastly, I'd hope that all of you will enter me into your contacts so that you can reach out and let me know how you're doing. So thank you for letting me share time with you today. Merci, and have a wonderful event. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alex. Those are great remarks and really advice for our community. I probably should have introduced myself at the beginning. I've kind of forgot. I was so excited about getting on with the show because I think it's going to be great. My name's Brad Broman. I'm the Managing Director of the Inclusive Workplace and Supply Council of Canada. And that's one of the hats I wear. I work in the accessibility space across the country, representing a number of other organizations. So moving on now to our keynote, I'm really excited about who's joining us today. Marco Pasqua, award-winning entrepreneur, accessibility consultant, friend of the community, and somebody with lived experience of disability, helping pave the way for all Canadians to have universal access to programs. He's a certified Rick Hansen accessibility expert and just an all-around great guy. And so with no further delay, I want to introduce Marco Pasqua as our keynote today at this forum.
Thank you so much, Brad, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning. As you heard, my name is Marco Pasqua, and I'm really, really excited to be here today. You know, when I learned that part of today's message was around defining success and how you define success, it made me really reflect back on my entrepreneurial journey. Now, I'm sure you've heard the term that, everything in life happens for a reason. And if I looked at the early days of my life and sort of how I got to where I am today, I would have probably said to you, that's ridiculous. How can every single event that occurs to us lead to the next thing, and the next thing? But little did I know that actually being born with a disability was prepping me to be the perfect entrepreneur. As somebody with a disability, we often deal with the ups and downs of life. We have to adapt to challenges that are faced right in front of us. We have to utilize our network and the people around us to create opportunities where opportunities didn't previously exist. And so what I'm going to share with you over the next 20 minutes or so is exactly how my experiences in being brought into this world were getting me ready to be the perfect entrepreneur, and how everyone can define success in their own way, and it doesn't have to look the same as everyone else. But before I get into that, I should probably tell you a little bit more about who I am as a person. So who am I, and what is that backstory? Now, I was born 3 months premature, okay? I only weighed 2 pounds, 10 ounces at birth. Okay? I was so early that the doctors actually told my parents that I would be lucky to survive the night. They even told my mother and my father to not bother to sign the birth certificate because I was probably going to die. Now, the irony of this story is that I was actually born on July 4th, 1985. July 4th, for our US counterparts, is obviously Independence Day. And I think that really has stuck with me my entire life because as a person with a disability, I'm constantly trying to prove my independence. Right? And so I take this very seriously. Although doctors told my parents I was lucky to even survive the night, I did survive the night. And unfortunately, they learned as a result of being born 3 months premature that I suffered brain damage at birth, which would result in me having cerebral palsy. For myself, it affects my two legs and my right arm. So typically speaking, I use a wheelchair to get around. But again, I wasn't deterred. My parents, I'm only first generation Canadian. My dad's an immigrant who came to Canada from Italy to create a better life for his family. And I was going to prove just that he didn't do this in vain and that I could be the perfect example of the son that he was looking for. I did end up continuing on to be in hospitals for the next 13 years, having various surgeries, but it was an incredible experience because those surgeries and that time in hospital meant that I was around doctors for the early stages of my life. And it meant that because I was in a hospital bed the entire time, the only thing that I had to work on was my social skills. My skills of talking to others, being able to build up networks, being able to build up self-confidence. And it certainly helped that I was around a lot of articulate people, such as doctors, who would help me to refine my speaking abilities. I didn't know it at the time, but again, this would serve me later on in life. All I thought was, here I am, a kid looking to make social connections, and I'm being surrounded by doctors. What better way to do that than be around some of these smartest people that I've ever met that were also taking care of my needs? So I had 13 surgeries in the first 13 years of my life, and that really shaped, and I saw all the different things that these doctors were doing as team members. It actually introduced me to team sport. And so although I was born with a disability and I wasn't able to do soccer like my dad would love, because being an Italian, to be stereotypical, he always wanted his son to play soccer, but I couldn't play soccer, but I could do other things. So I wanted to show my dad that here in British Columbia, I could do almost anything I set my mind to. And so I went out there and I got involved in rock climbing, wheelchair basketball, wheelchair track and field, swimming, horseback riding, you name it, I did it. I got involved in it all. And that early stages of being introduced to team-based settings really helped me because I realized that we can all utilize the strengths of people around us in order to accomplish a common goal. The value that I learned about the fact that I didn't need to be a genius or perfect at everything, but I could be perfect at some things was great because for anyone who's out there as a supplier, as an entrepreneur, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be the expert, but you can certainly build a team around you that can help you to get the job done. And that was introduced to me as early on as just something as being introduced to sports. But then how could I tie this love for sports into advocacy? How could I use my voice in different ways that could help to strengthen the community around me? Well, I was introduced to advocacy at a very young age, actually the age of around 8 to 9 years old. And this is actually a moment that I have on tape that would forever change my life. Now, early on in the days of my life, I was involved in many not-for-profit charities as an ambassador, as a spokesperson. And back in the day, in the 90s, I had the opportunity to be on the Timmy's Christmas Telethon, which used to air here out of British Columbia on CBC at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre. And this was a live event that was being broadcast across our province. And I didn't think anything of it. I never really had the nerves. I just wanted to showcase to people that I knew of the organizations that were supporting me as a child with a disability, helping me to go to summer camp, helping to infuse more self-confidence in me. And this opportunity that I'm about to share with you changed my life forever. Because although I didn't have aspirations to be a speaker, the host of that show, well, he had something different in mind. Let me share it with you.
Your name's Marco, right?
Yeah.
How are you, Marco?
Good. I was on last year's Timmy's Telethon.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
He's an old hand at this.
You're an old hand. What's it say here about you love art? Do you do drawings and things?
Oh yeah. Last time I drew a picture of my dad doing soccer because that's one of my dad's favorite sports.
How about you? Do you like it too?
Yeah, I used to go to his games, but now I don't. Yeah, and another favorite place that I like to go is Camp Squamish. And if people said buddy that I can't go to Camp Squamish again, and so if people keep on sending each year, then we can keep on going into Camp Squamish and having a good time.
I couldn't put it better, Marco.
I'd like to say, if you could show this to the people on my check, how much.
Sure, my pleasure. My pleasure, Marco. This is the little check. Hold that end there, son. And I'll hold the other end. There we go. There he is. He's holding it up. It says $100. $100, huh? Thank you, Marco.
Thank you, Marco.
Marco, you know what I think? Marco, I think next year we'll get you to do all of the little things they call promotions or commercials for Timmy's. Would you like to do that?
Yeah.
Big hand for Marco here. Thank you.
Isn't it interesting how an innocent moment like that could seem like nothing? And so in that moment, Red Robinson, who's a legend here in BC, he welcomed some of the biggest rock legends we've ever seen. Elvis Presley, the Beatles, you name it. And here's a guy just looking at an 8-year-old saying, I think this guy's got something in him. I had no idea what I was signing up for. But when I said yes, I didn't know that Red was going to follow through with what he said. And the very next year, I was contacted to be asked if I could be the ambassador for the Timmy's Christmas Telethon and be flown to mini telethons across my province and be able to help raise money for the organization that gave back to me for so many years. So I said yes. And this got me on this whirlwind of doing interviews and being in newspapers and being called to the principal's office, even when I wasn't being a bad boy, but that was the only place where I could take a phone call to do radio interviews. And it really changed my life. And I thought to myself, wow, this is really fun. But I never thought of this as a career, right? And so after I went through high school and graduated high school, I was faced with the reality that no longer was I a rosy-cheeked, bright young boy. The reality of being an adult set in, right? I had to figure out after high school, what do I do? As a young adult, you move out of the house, you find a job, right? You figure out what you need to do for your medical supplies. I use a manual wheelchair, so I need to figure out leg braces, manual wheelchair. There was a real indignity for me about being somebody that was seen as on the system, in the system, getting persons with disability support. And there's nothing wrong with that. But again, that nagging voice inside my head of you're independent, you're supposed to show your independence. This is about showing your independence. And to be quite honest with you, I wanted to prove to my parents that I wasn't going to have to rely on them for the rest of my life. They were exhausted at all the paperwork that they had to fill out. And by the time you turn 18, most people with disabilities are ejected from any support systems or any systems where you're getting bursaries or grants or being part of particular communities. You're just kind of left on your own as an adult to figure it all out. And my parents were exhausted. So what did I do? I moved out at the age of 19. I ended up getting an apartment. It was a crummy apartment with cockroaches and everything, you name it. But I was proving yet again, I was going to show my independence and show what success for me really looked like. Then I did get a job. I got a degree as a video game designer at the Art Institute of Vancouver, and I landed a job at one of the biggest game studios in the world. And at that point, I thought, perfect, I've met the peak of my success. I got a degree as a game designer, and now I'm working at one of the biggest game studios in the world. But unfortunately, during the 2008 and 2010 recession, I lost my job along with 1,500 other people. And here was a reality check for me. I was devastated. This is the only thing that I knew was going out there, getting this degree as a game designer. And I thought I was going to be set for life. And now I was being faced with the reality as to, I don't have a job anymore. And I remember calling up my girlfriend at the time and letting her know that I'd lost my job. Now, I kid you not, everyone, in that moment, my girlfriend was on the other end of the phone and she started jumping for joy. I said, why are you so excited? She said, because this is not what I feel you were meant to do, Marco. I feel like you were meant to use your voice to light a fire in people. And you know what? Because of who you are, you never would have quit. So this is the catalyst that's going to launch you into the next phase of your life. I said, well, what do you mean? She said, I think you were meant to start a business to become a professional speaker, doing those things that you used to do as a little boy. That's not a pipe dream. That can become your reality. And I'm going to be here to support you. Believe it or not, that girlfriend would later become my wife. I've been with her now for 17 years. And she was the one that was there for me when I could barely rub 2 pennies together, barely had any money to my name. But she believed in me. And she believed in the fire that each and every one of us possess as entrepreneurs. So when I tell you that being born early with a disability was prepping me for this, I was starting to realize that vision now. I was starting to realize maybe this could be something for me. Maybe I could make something of myself. And so self-employment really became the catalyst for me. Forget working for somebody else. I could shape my own story. I wasn't going to be defined by someone else's definition of what success really means. I was going to create that for myself. And that's what each and every one of us as entrepreneurs, especially those with disabilities, have the opportunity to do. And so why can't we use our lived experiences in the real world? Well, the answer is we can. So as a result of losing my job back in 2010, I went on a whirlwind. I just started reaching out to all those organizations, all those charities that were there for me when I was a little kid. I said, can I speak for you? I don't even need to do it for any money. I'm willing to speak for free. I just want to get out there a message of utilizing the strengths of other people. I even created my own system for networking based on what I was doing to succeed in life called the Q principle, which stands for creatively utilize your best energy. Why? Because every one of us has the ability to use our energy and utilize the strengths of others to accomplish common goals. Does that sound familiar? It was what I saw the doctors doing. It's what I was doing through sports. And now it's something that I could do through the working world, through showing people that you can use your God-given talents to showcase to the world that you'll never be defined by anyone else. We all write our own story. And I was determined to write my own. You can even see there, I'm working alongside somebody I've looked up to my entire life, the man in motion himself, Mr. Rick Hansen. And as a result of me believing in myself, one thing led to another to where I actually got to work with Rick. And I'm happy to say I've been working alongside Rick for the past decade now in work around accessibility, being a consultant, being a speaker, all because I didn't give up on myself in moments where others would define it as failure. So I ask a question to all of you. How do you tell your story out there as entrepreneurs, as procurement individuals, as other vendors? Who are you and what are you telling them about yourself? This is your opportunity to define your story. I look at opportunities through my business as a speaker and accessibility consultant to create wow moments. And I encourage you all to do that. You're probably going, what the heck is happening in that picture there, Marco? That's actually me rappelling off of a 20-story building in my wheelchair to really show people what the Cube principle really means, to creatively utilize your best energy. Easter Seals, where you saw me talking about them in the video clip with Red Robinson, actually does an event every year across Canada called the Easter Seals Drop Zone. And years ago, when I first launched my business, I asked them if I could do the drop zone in my wheelchair. Now, this was pretty unconventional, and they'd heard very little people do this before in their chair. But they said, Marco, if you want to try this, we're down to let you try this. And so I thought, I was just launching my business. What a great way to promote it. Not only am I raising money for a not-for-profit to help people with disabilities go to summer camp like I did, but this is a really good way for me to actually put into practice the mantra of creatively utilizing my best energy. Not only could I raise money for a charity that I believed in, but also I could do it in such a way that it would create a media. Who is this Marco guy, and why is he dangling off of a 20-story building in a wheelchair? Well, everyone, it worked. That was the greatest way that I could promote my business for free. I was being asked to go on daytime talk shows to talk about my experiences as an entrepreneur with a disability. What is this Q principle thing? They kept asking me, and I was able to tell them. And I made this post of the moment before I started to rappel off the building of me dangling there with the climbing crew with the quote, knowledge comes from learning, wisdom comes from living. So you have to live your life and you have to implement these things in your life in order to create that success. And that's exactly what I was doing in action. But it's also important that you create a personal touch with your stories. As an entrepreneur, it's not just about what you sell and how you sell it. It's who are you behind that message. So I always share my vulnerabilities online. I share messages about my daughter, my 3-year-old daughter, Stella. She's changed my life forever. And I know that every single day she's looking to her dad, disability or not, as somebody that she looks at as a leader. And each and every one of us are a leader to people in our social sphere every single day. So don't be afraid to share your vulnerabilities as an entrepreneur, even if you think it's a failure, because again, you are writing your own story. You've got to develop your niche. And in business, we all know it's called a unique selling proposition. I actually like to redefine a USP as a unique story positioning. What can we do to position our story in the best possible light? What I did was I actually created a timeline of events for myself as a speaker where I could use this of key moments in my life or milestones in my life that I could create and use those milestones as ways of creating blog posts, podcast conversations, episodes, keynote presentations, and you're welcome to do this for your own business. I started at the day that I was born, 1985, and because I'm a nerd in the game industry, I did this as an Excel document. Yes, thank you very much. With drop-down menus of the event outcome. Was it positive? Was it negative? Was it indifferent? My comments or an analogy that I could pull from that, and then what I felt in the moment that those events took place for me. And I wrote things like sadness, uncertainty, fear, because if I felt those things as they were happening to me, chances are the audience that I'm speaking to is going to feel those things as I'm talking to them about those experiences. And so it doesn't matter if you're not a speaker like I am, you can use the same type of template in order to create stories for yourself for your next post on Instagram or your next post on social media, whatever platforms you use your own life and your own vulnerabilities to your advantage. That's how you define success, everyone. So what my niche is I'm helping people understand the benefits and the values of what universal design is through my own unique experiences, right? So, for example, you have a picture here of a guy who wants to just have a drink at a bar with his friends, but he's a wheelchair user. But thank goodness, this bar actually has a lowered countertop. So he has the dignity of actually being able to eat side by side with his friends, not necessarily having to look up at them as they all sit on bar stools eating without him, right? So being able to just enjoy a drink with friends. Family, you might have a friend or family member with a disability if you yourself don't have a disability, or obviously you're involved with this organization. So clearly this is something that is of importance to you. Or somebody who may be deaf may say a story like a visual fire alarm saved their life because they were able to see that it was happening as it was going off in their hotel room and they were able to get out in time using real world examples. So there's different ways you can tell your story. Like I said, blog posts, radio or TV interviews, social media, and community meetups. And guess what? The majority of these activities are absolutely free, right? People want positive stories, and you don't necessarily have to fork over dollars for your marketing budget in order to do this. You just have to be creative, everyone, right? So what can you do to expand your network? Well, as individuals who are vendors, who are operators, promote your skills, hobbies, interests, and lived experience. Like I said, social media, journaling, other ways, but also reach out to people, utilize their strengths, know that they can be the experts of their space, and you can be left doing what you love to do, right? So most of the time, those things are free, and they're going to definitely change your life and the lives of others. So I guess my final question to all of you is, how do you define success? Because I'm pretty sure I shared with you exactly some of the ways that you can do that yourself. So thank you very much. I've been Marco Pasqua. I hope that we're right on time here, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to share my entrepreneurial journey. I want to tip my hat to all you entrepreneurs out there, especially those with disabilities. And remember, you're the one that tells your own story. Thank you. Sorry to the interpreter, by the way. I realize I speak very quickly.
Thank you, Marco, for all those incredible words. I know that I'll be leaving today thinking about the ways that I can define success in the future, and I'm so excited to be a part of today's program. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Dirksen, and I'm the content manager here at the IWSCC. Today, I have the great pleasure of introducing our next speakers, each of which is also an entrepreneur who defines success in their own way. Each of our speakers will also have some time for questions at the end of their time. So if you have any questions for our entrepreneurs today, please feel free to add those questions into the chat, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can because we have a number of speakers today to help us differentiate between your questions. If it's for a particular entrepreneur, you can go ahead and just include the number 1 at the end of your questions for our first speaker, who I'm so excited to introduce. Our first speaker for this section of our program today is the driving force behind a business that designs and sells inclusive merchandise like neurodiversity pride pieces, always aiming to break down barriers and eliminate stigma through their practice and their products. Please welcome entrepreneur, advocate, and the owner and operator of IWSCC Certified business, Retrophiliac, Margot Wask. Welcome, Margot. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to share a little bit about my story. I am an autistic individual residing in Vancouver, BC. And the work that I do really came from a place of feeling defeated. I think many of us can be in that space where we have had different jobs and they just haven't panned out. For me, on paper, I am just a entry-level employee. I do not have any post-secondary education. I dropped out in 11th grade and ended up getting my GED. From there, I was lost. Every job I had made me feel like I was just not worthy of being accommodated, or that at that time I didn't have my formal autism diagnosis. And I want to make a note that self-diagnosis is valid because accessing a diagnosis can be very cost prohibitive for a lot of people. I didn't know much about myself other than the fact that I felt like an outcast. I couldn't understand why these social interactions were just so emotionally draining and why I couldn't really go to work a lot of the time. And then when I was at work, I feel like I was met with a lot of opposition from my peers and my management. It felt like every single day that I was getting into an argument or disagreement, and it made it very distressing for me to be able to continue to get my work done in a way that was pleasing to everybody around me. I knew that I always had this sense of wanting to do things for myself and not feeling like I did very well with feedback a lot of the time. So as a young child, or at least like a preteen, early teen, I started purchasing vintage clothing from secondhand shops and reselling it on eBay, as at the time, the current platforms that exist, like Depop, Poshmark, etc., just didn't exist. I was in my own kind of niche market because the thrift stores were not picked over, and I was able to utilize skills I had learned on a children's website called Neopets to understand how to buy and sell and assess the cost of products that already existed within the auction database. So from there, I was able to get a baseline price to understand what I would price the item that I just had purchased for around, 50 cents to $2. And then I could sell it for, one time I think I sold a skirt or a dress. It ended up going to auction and selling between like $70 and $90. And I knew that I had figured out buying and selling and really enjoying the whole process of photographing, writing a very good description, taking the measurements, everything from the initial interaction of purchasing the item all the way to the customer service and mailing it out through Canada Post. Those skills translated into my art business, and I want to let you know that Retrophiliac started as that vintage resale company. Then it turned into my visual artwork, which I was able to display and sell and really get it out there. Then Retrophiliac became my current endeavor, which is mostly enamel pins as well as lots of other merchandise that helps people communicate their access needs, their identities, their if they're neurodivergent, if they're autistic, so many different things. I have over 250 items. And where this ties into my advocacy work is really a full circle moment. That is because a lot of the work that I do is dedicated to fighting for additional resources, both provincially and federally, for disabled and or neurodivergent entrepreneurs and self-employed people to have resources that are currently not available to them. A lot of the funding we see goes into pre-existing, very profitable businesses and organizations to hire inclusively and make sure that they are accommodating their employees. However, we don't see many of these same funds to help develop programs for disabled and neurodivergent entrepreneurs. And I use my business to showcase that we are capable if we are given the opportunity. But I also stress that not every single disabled person wants to follow the route of self-employment, and that that's very valid in scope because it is a lot of hard work. I think we often may glaze over the fact that we are doing every single thing, at least in my case. Everything from dealing with customer complaints to photographing the items to listing them to dropping them off at the post office. And there's so much more. Part of my business is in person. So I deal with retail stores, both on the wholesale and consignment end, as well as going to different markets and events and setting up my table and interacting with people and taking it down. However, the position that affords me, or this privilege, I suppose you could call it, is that I am able to be front and center when it comes to talking about the resources that I fight for and how I love public speaking and talking about the work that I do. I went to an event last week called the Abilities Expo that was put on by an organization called Connectra. And I had met with so many different organizations and businesses that had only seen my work for the first time. A question that is often asked of me is, are these your own designs? And I remind people, yes, this is my work. And they are oftentimes shocked. I don't know if that has to do with stigma or with the fact that how could somebody get things like that made? And so I have completely taught myself the sourcing of these items, mostly from China, but I do work with some local businesses to get things like vinyl stickers made. And I do all my own packaging of my items. I'm not really outsourcing anything other than the manufacturing. And so when people look at my items and they see things that say accommodations needed, I have a disability, autistic not rude, things like that, it can really allow them to advocate for themselves in a non-speaking way. And just the same way that I advocate for myself when it comes to needing more resources as a small business owner, I am allowing my customers and my supporters to have an alternative way to communicate. That oftentimes is non-speaking because they can point and gesture. Part of my pins that I have designed were mindfully executed in the way that they are mostly 1.5 inches in width by 0.39, sometimes different in height. But this allows my customers to create a unique message. They can take a pin that has their identity on it. They can pair it with something like, please be patient with me. Communicating is challenging for me. I also have pronoun pins and pride flag pins because many autistic people are also queer or part of the LGBTQIA+ community. And because of that, I have really narrowed in or zeroed in on exactly what my customer base is. It always pleases my soul when I see somebody buying a pin for autism as well as their pride flag that they identify with and their pronouns. It makes me feel like I really have this strong and deep connection with the people that I am serving. And because of that, I am just so incredibly grateful, and I love to be in this position. Not only do I do retail wholesale trade, but I also do peer coaching and mentoring as well. I'm part of a couple different programs right now where I offer that service. And I also run, at least for the past 2 years, a cohort through an organization called Curiko, which is Curiko, based here in British Columbia, where I run people through the idea all the way through to the execution and through marketing and business and customer service relations. We talk about niche, we talk about outsourcing, we talk about all kinds of different things. And this came about because I was expressing to them how I didn't have the resources available to me, and I wanted to change that for people. Although we don't have any financial grants to pair with this experience, I am hopeful that funding can maybe be found, because at this time, as much as I would love to be the one to provide those grants, I am not in that position. But my hope is that I can grow my business, get larger contracts, especially through the IWSCC, to be able to expand into a wider range and to hire neurodivergent and disabled people, and to eventually one day create my very own grant to help people. So as you can see, it really is full circle when we are talking about activism, advocacy, and running a small business that is really dedicated to that. So I just wanted to thank you all so much for being here today with me and being part of REACH and engaging with the IWSCC, which has already helped me so much on my entrepreneurship journey. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Margot, for joining us today. Another quick reminder to folks joining us that if you have any questions for Margot, please pop those in the chat, and we'll be sure to get through as many as we can. One question that I have for you, Margot, to sort of start things off, for the folks in our audience who might be part of those purchasing organizations or might just want to get to know folks who are part of the neurodiverse community or might have other invisible disabilities, in your opinion, as someone who helps represent those communities, is there a good first step or a good way to approach those conversations with individuals you might not know those things about, or that you might not have as much confidence or experience with?
That's a really great question. I know that, like, if we're going to talk about disclosure, that not everybody is comfortable disclosing that. I've done my best through the experience through Curiko, as well as running a couple of Facebook groups, one called Made by Autistics Marketplace and Community, and the other one being Made by Neurodivergence Marketplace and Community. And that way people don't even have to disclose it immediately because they're part of that group. They're posting their art and their wares and things for sale. And by being part of that group, you know, we take it upon good faith that they are who they say they are and that they have the opportunity to show what we're capable of. Because something I notice is, sure, some individuals are not super comfortable disclosing, but then on the flip side, I see people who are not autistic or not neurodivergent selling things that may use unfavorable symbols or just are not made by our community and being sold back to our community and those that support us. So what I really wanted to do was make a place that you want to support an autistic or neurodivergent person directly. Well, here's your opportunity to do so. So sometimes we just have to find people that are already comfortable with who they are and are in the place where they can actually really express themselves and support them.
Yeah, well, I appreciate in many ways you being a part of our community and part of our forum today, being a community member who's willing to share your experience and give a little advice to our community as well. Margot, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for joining our forum.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our next speaker, who I'm so excited to introduce, is a creative entrepreneur, global storyteller, award-winning producer and agent, certified professional coach, active community builder, dedicated diversity advocate, the list goes on, and of course, the founder and CEO of IWSCC Certified Business Real Life Pictures Incorporated. Here to talk a little bit about running a business that supports others and creates opportunities for them, Kulbinder Sarang Caldwell. Welcome, Kulbinder.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you for having me come in and speak at the IWSCC Reach Forum. And just to let people know, and yourself, Alex, so if there's some questions as we go along, I'm more than happy to take them as we continue. So what I wanted to talk about today was defining success as a business owner with a disability. Real Life Pictures is a fully integrated production company, as well as a literary agency representing diverse, neurodiverse, and LGBTQ screenwriters and directors. And I gotta say that even though I was or am invisibly disabled, that was not the first thing that I would lead with. And I think that now, 4 years into Real Life Pictures being out there and representing neurodiverse screenwriters and directors, it gave me the confidence that I'm not only the support, but I'm also an invisibly disabled woman of color entrepreneur. For me to be able to say that out loud is how I define success. Because for many years, I believe that there's always been this stigma, and there is a difference between individuals that have a late in life diagnosis versus one that has been, since they were kids. So I represent neurodiverse individuals, and I have two that are very, very different. One was diagnosed with Tourette's as a young child. So throughout his childhood and growing up, he knew that he had Tourette syndrome. And the other one, and you can see we did an interview, podcast interview with IWSCC Graham Kent, who is neurodivergent and has Tourette's. Friedman, who has a late in life diagnosis of autism, and myself. And we really talked about what representation meant, what being your authentic self is all about. And that is really important to me. All of my writers, be they neurodiverse or not, I want them to go into a safe environment where they are heard, they are supported, and if they need accommodation, that they will ask for it, and then that would be provided. With these individuals, they can always come to me and say, I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I'm not sure what these notes on this script is all about. And I'm more than happy to talk to them, walk them through it, answer questions, get clarification from the producers that are providing these notes, and really try to make sure that they are as comfortable as possible in order for them to be able to do the best job that they possibly can. And these safe sort of environments are not necessarily always available to us. So I've also told them that if there was ever a time where they felt unsafe, or it was a toxic environment and they weren't able to do their best, that I would pull them out of that writer's room or whatever it happens to be. And, you know, just having that sort of support from me, I believe, says to them that regardless of what situation that I'm put in and that Kulbinder is putting me in, I know that she has my back. I know I can always go to that individual and be able to make sure that, you know, I can be my authentic self at that time. And one of my other neurodiverse individuals just went and directed a series episode, and it was through the DSO, which is the Disability Screen Office. An ex-executive director was the producer, creator of this show. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience for her because you felt like accommodations was the rule rather than the exception. And I think that that's what success looks, I believe, for most of us, is making sure that when we ask for accommodation, or if we let them know what our feelings are, that we're not being stigmatized or ostracized for having to feel that way. My invisible disability is that I have post-concussion syndrome. I had my first concussion in 2015, and then just recently in March of this year, I slipped on some rocks and I fell and I hit my head. And I was out of town. I was in France at the time by myself on a business trip. So I just felt like I needed to keep going and not tell anybody about it, not kind of take the time that I really needed to recover, and kind of just saying, no, I don't have another concussion. But I did. And that is really, really difficult sometimes as an entrepreneur, for you to stand up for yourself and say, I need a break. I need some time for myself. And I think that that is leading by example. And if the head of the agency, the literary agency, could not ask for accommodation for herself, then how are those that I represent going to be able to ask that of others? So my dog didn't eat my homework, but he did step on my computer and broke it. And this is in the full throes of me having a concussion, and I was frozen. I wasn't able to make any decisions or anything like that. And if I had sort of just took a moment and stepped back and realized what I needed to do and give myself the time to recover, I think I would have made some better choices, and I probably would have been able to get an insurance settlement for my for my computer and stuff like that. But that's another thing. There are individuals that we go through on a day-to-day basis, and they will not understand that we're neurodiverse and we need accommodation and we need to be treated a certain way in order for us to be able to rest and recover and be able to move on. So a lot of what I do on a regular basis is to provide support and ensure that there's respect for the people that I represent, that they are accommodated and that they have a safe space in order for them to, be able to operate in. And that's what I believe is success. So Alex, are there some questions at all?
Hello. Yeah. Sorry, Goldbinder. Again, if folks have any questions in the chat, feel free to add those now. A question that I wanted to start with for you has to do with maybe flipping the script a little bit. As someone who creates spaces for individuals, like for entrepreneurs with disabilities and for writers telling their own stories, if I were someone in the audience today wondering how I apply my skills, how I find a space that's right for me, as someone who makes those spaces, what would you say to someone that's wondering that themselves?
I think that the first and foremost is know yourself and be comfortable in your own skin. So if you're not able to articulate that you, like, for example, myself, that I'm an invisibly disabled woman of color entrepreneur, then nobody else is going to be able to understand who you are, because you have not grounded yourself and said, this is who I am. And if you have questions, or if I need kind of open up that dialogue. But it starts with yourself and making sure that you are prepared to self-disclose. And if you're not, that's okay too. Everybody goes on this journey at their own pace and at their own time.
Absolutely. And one other question that I do have for you is, again, it's a little bit related to creating those spaces. Your business is a business that really creates its success by finding success for others. Do you feel that that has had an impact on the way that your business has developed over time? Or when you started Real Life, was it always your intention to create a space that developed success for others and represented underrepresented folks? It seems like those two things are very closely married. So I wonder if that was always the idea, or if it's something that grew over time.
Well, I was raised Sikh. Both of my parents are immigrants from India, and they are Sikhs. And really, one of the tenets of Sikhism is selfless service. So community building, offering aid to those that need it. So therefore, I've always been a diversity advocate. I've always been a community builder, all of those kind of things. So when I resurrected my company, Real Life Pictures, again, it was to really create all of those feminist practices or, values that I hold dear myself, as the personification of that with Real Life Pictures. And I think that it's been more of a family, the agency and the community, rather than a competitive, I can't help you with your script because that way you're going to get the job and I'm not going to. That's not what I feel is a good, safe environment. So even though it has evolved, I think it has a good core foundation of the values that I hold dear, and who I am ultimately as a person.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes to show that just like our other speakers so far today, and as I'm sure we'll continue to hear through the rest of our forum, that it is the personal experiences that define us, and our own unique lived experience that helps us define the path that we go down in our own way, whether that's becoming an entrepreneur, becoming a corporate purchaser or supply chain professional, working in advocacy, or even finding other paths. We have a few speakers today who were touched by things like video gaming, either in their career or early on. And you yourself work with so many creative individuals that create their own stories. And whether it is horror or suspense or comedy, it is just another way to express yourself and the way that you experience and see the world.
Absolutely. And what you said is very, very key. It's your lived experience is yours uniquely yourself. And that is how I represent everybody. It's not like I have, two South Asian female writers and I can't have any more. Everybody is unique. Everybody brings something different to the table. And that's really what I was trying to articulate with the label of being invisibly disabled, South Asian, women of color entrepreneur. That label may be the same, but the lived experience gives you that nuance and the uniqueness for everybody. So you're right.
Incredible. Well, Kulbinder, thank you so much for joining our forum today and being part of Reach.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
I'm sure we'll continue to have a great afternoon with our next speaker. Our next and final speaker for this section of our program, maybe last, but he's certainly not least. He oversees the daily operations of 35 companies and growing as president and CEO of the CJ Group of Companies. His founding company, the IWSCC Certified CJ Graphics, is the most award-winning printing and communication solutions company in the world. And he spreads his success through entrepreneurship and community building. So to start us off and to get to know our next speaker a little better, we have a short video. So please get to know Mr. Jay Mandarino.
It's not every day you see the CEO of a company riding the rails or pulling the 360 on a ramp, but that's exactly what Jay Mandarino does.
And why? Because skateboarding changed his life, and he's using his successful graphics business to help others who have life struggles to experience the joy of skateboarding.
When I was 9 years old, I attempted suicide. I had no self-esteem. I couldn't read or write. I was told I was stupid. I'd go to the front of the classroom and read. Everyone would laugh at me. It was just a terrible situation. I got tested and tested. I finally got institutionalized. I was put on Ritalin. And thank God my parents never gave up on me. They pulled me out. We finally found a doctor who figured out ADHD and dyslexia. My parents sold their home. I went to a private school in the States. And at that school was the first time I felt normal. My best friend taught me to skateboard, and skateboarding just changed my whole life. Inside of this huge facility, we have 3 buildings that are attached, just under 250,000 square feet, and one of those buildings is designated to our skate park. I teach there on Saturdays. We're the world's largest indoor not-for-profit skate park. Our Kids Being Kids, which is our program for kids and their family affected by cancer, which is free. We have a blind and vision impaired program for blind and vision impaired people, which is amazing. This tech deck, which is also known as a fingerboard, simulates a real skateboard. Kids use them to practice their tricks. But with the blind and vision impaired, what I've come up with is I show them with their fingers where to place their feet. And then we do that on the fingerboard and we get them used to that. Then when we get them on the skateboard, it sort of all comes together. We've got an autistic program. We've got, any sort of challenge someone has, we can sort of mold a program and combine it with skateboarding or scooter riding, which is great for self-esteem. People say, like, why do you do this? That you're probably losing money every day. And, I think it's my way of giving back, and also what I went through. I would never want another child to go through that. And when you see these kids and, they come in maybe shy or maybe scared, they want to do it or don't want to try it, and they're smiling at the end of it, it's just, it's amazing, making a difference in someone else's life.
And CJ Skate Park is located in Mississauga and is open every day of the week.
Okay, I have to unmute myself. I was just saying that to watch our ASL interpreter, who's awesome, to interpret all that, I hadn't seen that video in a while, and it was amazing watching you keeping up with that. So good for you. Thanks, everybody. And first of all, I want to thank IWSCC, of course, and all the supplier partners. It's such a great organization. It's a great start to really making everything more diverse, especially the supply chain. Unfortunately, or fortunately, when I started 41 years ago, there was no such thing. I wish there had, because I would have been here a lot faster. You know, it's really tough when you're an entrepreneur, especially a small business like a lot of our members are. You know, when I first started too, to try to get into a corporation, whether you have a disability or don't have a disability, it's just hard to get in and harder to get in now. So I think it's great that corporations are really trying to make this part of their practice. And I recognize some of the names here, and you all should be commended. So thank you, everybody there. I guess, you know, you saw the video. So yeah, there was basically no hope for me, and I was never even supposed to go to high school. So obviously I defeated all the odds there. First person in the world to jump over Ferrari in 1976. It was kind of cool. The kids go, hey, I can't find that on YouTube. I go, hey, we didn't have YouTube back then. Which is sort of funny. They can't imagine that. But you know, part of what I do is because we've been in business for 41 years. We're the most awarded printer in the world, as you heard. And we do everything from signage to display work. We do most of Harborfront. We do a lot of the hotels, interior, exterior, most of the movie studios, games, entertainment, finance companies, most of the banks. So we've got great clients. And what we're trying to do now is sort of pool with some of the smaller clients, because getting through the process of an RFP or even being, you know, a designated supplier to a big company is a really onerous task, and most people don't have the bandwidth to do that. So what we try to do, since we're recognized, is say, you know what, we work with the blind, we work with the deaf, we have interpreters, we have different members of the IWSCC. We can go in as a group and we can look at the lay of your land, because we all have different disabilities, and we can say, you know what, have you thought of doing Braille on your elevators or Braille on your door? And everyone, because they have a different challenge, is able to add something. So you can achieve with a small group what you would pay a huge consulting firm a ton of money to maybe get the stuff right or wrong, but we all live through it every day. So it's pretty cool, and that's just starting now. So excited about that. You know, since COVID, the world has been messed up. I don't care where you are. We deal with many different countries, and it's crazy, let alone the price of food and everything, the raising costs. So it's really hard for people to stay afloat of things and be positive. So mental stress is just it's the next big pandemic as far as I'm concerned. And it's great that a lot of the organizations part of this are trying to do something about that for their people and for, you know, the country. But it is an ongoing challenge. So we're trying to help there and make a difference. So that's a great thing. The supply chain is it's so much harder now because, you know, a lot of people don't have receptions anymore, or everything's online, so you don't even know the right person to talk to. So it's really great when we have key people who are the decision makers in companies that can listen to us when we do those talks where, you know, you get 5 minutes each to talk about what you do. And it's opened up a lot of doors, I think, for a lot of organizations and a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of our members, which is great. So that's excellent. I want to not talk the whole time because I really am here for all of you, and I want to answer some questions. If you don't have any, I can think of some. But I know Alex has been a great MC lately and host, and he's getting pretty good at it. So I don't know, Alex, if we have some questions already, or if you want me to go over some more specifics, or what do you think?
Well, yeah, why don't I jump in?
Sure, that's all the time we have today. So no, that's
yeah.
the comic relief. That's the comic relief part of the program.
Yeah, why don't I jump in with a question just so that our audience members have a chance to get their questions in the chat as well. I did want to start by asking, some of the questions I've asked so far today have to do with those first steps. A question that I have for you, as an organization that has reached a lot of success already and help spread that success by involving other organizations where you can. What would you say to someone who feels like they're a middle-sized business but wants to grow, wants to get their foot in the door with big business, or take that step to grow, to expand their scope. Do you have any advice for someone in that position about what steps that they could take to help their business grow?
Yes, I mean, everything has changed since COVID. It's just a whole different thing now with people working at home, and I'm not 100% in favor of working at home. I believe if you're an organization, there's that team spirit that you have when you're all together in the same space and just exchanging ideas, like those simple little casual conversations when you're walking by the halls, like, hey, that's a good idea. Why don't we try that? And we know this works. So the challenge right now, since there is you don't necessarily get the right person to speak to. Meaning there's so many checks and balances now in some organizations, and I understand 100%, they make the process difficult in a way, and not to them, but to us, it becomes more difficult because there's much more onerous on us to answer things and come up with specific things that you may not necessarily have as a mid-sized business. So you're sort of automatically disqualified. And, they want to just deal with big organizations because, it just makes sense. There's more bandwidth, right? So really, I find you got to find out who is the right decision maker. I mean, I remember we were pitching a very big, we do online portals. We actually did the Uber Eats one many years ago. And, we realized on this other site that we were pitching that in the meeting, we weren't dealing with anybody that was making the decision. So it's great they might have liked it, but, we're relying on them to take that message back to their management or whoever the key stakeholder is to make, her, him, or she, or they is going to make that decision. And we never get to present. And sometimes, that human touch is sort of important to know people's backgrounds. Like often people say, okay, so you do printing, that's great. I can go anywhere and get printing. And, it's the same thing. What differentiates you from everybody else? And I always say, well, we deal with 100 charities. All of our profit goes to fund our philanthropic work. So if you want to be part of that, you get to share in that too. And they go, oh, that's good enough for me. So, I think those things are important. So really trying to find out who that person is in the organization that really does make the decision, and never give up, that they're going to say, no, no, no. And, I can say, cause I've seen it over decades, you know what, keep trying, maybe next year we're going to open up, we're going to, cause I've already got a stable of suppliers, but you got to just keep being there. And, cause eventually someone will make a mistake. And if you're there when that mistake happens, you're right in there because they know that you've been trying to get in. You've been cordial, you've been polite. They know that you've got the basic supplies to do what it is you're selling. And they say it's all about timing. It is all about timing. Be at the right place at the right time.
Absolutely. And one question that we do have in the chat that I think might be a little bit for the IWSCC, but I think has a lot to do with what you're saying about finding that right person and knowing who to talk to. So I'd love to hear your opinion on it. One of our audience members asks, do you have an advocate to help with recognition of diversity? I deal with the government and their branch does not have a diversity policy in place. So when it comes to finding the right person, and in this case, as a diverse supplier, what are your thoughts on how to work with an organization who might not necessarily have the tools yet to have disability confidence or to explicitly include those businesses, but to still communicate your story and your experience and make that human connection?
So just so I understand the question directly, are you saying for us as the member or approaching someone to sell our service to, or are you talking as on the other end?
I think their question is on the other end, and I guess I'll sneak an answer in for anyone in the audience who wants to get started with a diversity policy or working with diverse owned businesses. We absolutely recommend reach out to us at the IWSCC. If we can do our best to help you get started on the path and to connect you with business owners who can also, like the advocates and the speakers we have today, who can also help support your program by getting to know them and their experiences a little more. So Jay, my question for you is from the supplier side, from the vendor side, what would you recommend when it comes to making that human connection? What's the best way to tell my story to someone that I just met?
So I'll answer that in a second, but I want to add on to what yours, because I think it's really important for
Sure.
organizations. I think, and we're seeing, and one of the banks put the stat out, I think it's like 70% of small to medium-sized business are going to be retiring in the next few years because the baby boom and all that age. So what we have now is we have less people and businesses will close. We have organizations that don't really know anything about disabilities, but everybody needs to, work on that supply chain and make it more diverse and more fair to everybody, because we have increasingly amount of learning disabilities and veterans and blind and vision impaired, and they're all of them have great contributions they can make. But on the supplier end, they don't know really where to go. So you're right, they should talk to you, and you often will get a group of us together and we can go in and we can analyze and say, hey, how many people do you have vision impaired in your organization that maybe are slightly impaired? Because, we can do Braille and we can put Braille signage. So there's solutions to everything, but it's a matter of knowing it. And I know, speaking at your conference and coming to several of the meetings, right now the IWSCC has a great supply base. So now it's just a matter of getting that into the suppliers. So how do we, as a supplier, sell to an organization? So you use the word advocate. I think that's really important. References. If you've got a client who you've done work for and is happy and they maybe weren't sure about using you, get them to write you a letter, or her, or they, or we. It's just more stuff that you can give to someone so that they can do that. Do a little video about yourself if you can, and get someone to critique it. Get fellow members to give you some sort of tips and stuff. But really it's getting that message across of what you do, and to narrow down what you do and why they should use you. What's the advantage of using you? Why should they call you when they can call a much bigger company? And what I tell, I've mentioned to several people on the call now, what I always tell people is, generally from my experience, someone with a disability works harder, longer hours than someone who doesn't. And part of that's just because we just had to be on the even playing field. But that work ethic doesn't go away. And that amount of time you spend on a project. And I've seen some of the suppliers we have and some of the creative briefs they've come up with and some of the solutions to things that not necessarily would a big agency be able to do. So there are definitely advantages.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your time with us today, Jay, and your experience. And just thank you from me personally for being a part of this year's Reach Forum.
Well, I'm glad to be part of it, and I hope you do more of these things. And we just really got to get the word out there, because there's a lot of disabled people. It's interesting. I'm doing a big gala where I'm the auctioneer. It's a great honor this Saturday for Famous People's Player Theater, where Diane Dupuis started this working with kids and youth who are disabled, and they actually serve the food. They actually act in the plays, and she's worked with many famous people. And it's just great to see this being recognized through the United Nations, who are going to be there that night, and just other people, because you know what? We have a large population that is disabled. So it's fantastic.
Excellent. And just thank you again for being a part of our big day. I'm sure we'll be looking forward to Reach again in 2025.
We will look forward to that. Thanks, everybody. Keep doing what you're doing, and thanks for giving everybody an opportunity.
And before we move on, I just want to take the opportunity to again thank Margot and Kulbinder, and to all of the suppliers that are part of the IWSCC community for being a part of that community, of that family. That community is made up of business owners across Canada, and it's also supported by the IWSCC's corporate members. As forward-thinking organizations, our members work together with the IWSCC to connect with and create opportunities for entrepreneurs with disabilities. I'm thrilled to welcome some of those members here today to talk about some of the ways that they define success in supplier diversity. So please join me in welcoming Lindsay Swanson from EY Canada, Megan Snow from Ontario Power Generation, or OPG, and from this year's official sponsor, Liana Gito from the Business Development Bank of Canada, or BDC. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
Now, before we dive into our questions today, I know I had a little bit of an intro just now, but why don't we start with a little quick introduction to let you speak for yourselves. If you could let our audience know maybe who you are, what you do, and a quick explanation of what your organization does for anyone in our audience who might not be as familiar as we are. As our official sponsor, Leanna, why don't I'll challenge you to start us off with our introductions.
Great. Do you guys hear? Yeah, okay, my microphone works great. So, my name is Liana Gito. I work at the Business Development Bank of Canada, BDC. So, BDC is a bank dedicated specifically for entrepreneurs. We give small, medium-sized loans to entrepreneurs. So, we have three types of services we offer. So, like I said, loans, financing services, advisory services, as well as our venture capital. So I specifically work for the procurement team. So I'm the senior advisor within the procurement team. And I was the one who officially launched our program with my old director at the time in 2019 for supplier diversity. So it's nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Leanna. Why don't we go to Lindsay, if you don't mind introducing yourself?
Yes, thank you, Alex. My name is Lindsay Swanson. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Canadian leader for supplier diversity and inclusion at EY. It's a national role, so I work with within our firm and with suppliers from coast to coast. EY, for anyone not familiar, is quite an old firm, and our roots are in audit and tax, but most recently, I would say within the last 10 years, specifically the last 5, we've really ramped up our full spectrum professional services practice from everything from consulting on things like supply chain and sustainability, to technology and large scale implementations. So really we have every type of professional service available through our firm. But my role again is to support entrepreneurs, to support diverse suppliers and diverse entrepreneurs and help them grow.
Amazing. And Megan, please introduce yourself.
Thanks. My name's Megan Snow. I'm the Senior Manager for Strategic Programs and Supply Chain at Ontario Power Generation. For those who are not familiar with Ontario Power Generation, we are Ontario's largest clean power generator in the province of Ontario. We operate over 66 hydroelectric stations, a couple of nuclear stations, 1 solar facility, 2 thermal generating stations, and we have a whole bunch of subsidiaries. Our subsidiaries are involved in natural gas cycle plants. They're involved in harvesting medical isotopes from our nuclear stations to make sure that those are available for the medical industry. We also have, through one of our subsidiaries, 85 hydroelectric stations located in the United States. So although our name is Ontario Power Generation, we're not just in Ontario, but that is where we do call home. My role in strategic programs is looking after our ESG programs when it comes to supply chain, as well as our supplier diversity program. I've worked at Ontario Power Generation for 15 years, all of those within supply chain. So it's really my passion project, and I'm so happy it got to become my career and my job.
Wonderful. And for our audience members, we are happy to help answer any questions that you might have. So throughout our panel today and for the rest of our program, please feel free to pop those questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. If you have a question that's for a specific person on our panel, please do your best to include their name, Megan, Leanna, or Lindsay, or even include their organization's initials. That's EY, OPG, and BDC. So to get started, our conversation today it's all about defining and enabling success, and maybe sharing some tips and tricks for our friends in the audience. So my first question gets right down to it. For your organization, what have been the most effective strategies or initiatives for implementing supplier diversity so far? And why don't I'll flip the script, and Megan, I'll challenge you to go first. So what have been OPG's most effective strategies so far for implementing supplier diversity?
Thanks. I think the most effective thing that we were able to have done for our organization that made the biggest needle move for us when it came to supplier diversity was have it become driven from the top down and become a priority for the entire organization. It wasn't just a supply chain project anymore or a Megan Snow passion project off the side of her desk. We had full backing from our CEO, our board of directors got on board, our entire leadership team, and we eventually added it as one of our metrics for our entire corporate scorecard, which was huge. So it's not just a supply chain metric, it's an entire corporate metric for our entire organization. And as soon as that happened, a whole bunch of other things were able to happen to be able to hold people accountable. Having it on our corporate scorecard meant it was tied to leaders' bonus structures. What a perfect way to hold them all accountable to meeting the drivers and the KPIs on this corporate scorecard. We put together a steering committee and a working committee with all of the different business units across the organization. And to hold them accountable to meeting that corporate target, we were able to have each business unit come up with what their target was from their budget on how they're going to meet that overall corporate target and be able to contribute to it. So now each and every one of those business units has a number to be held accountable for year over year. And our target goes up year over year, so it continues to increase. And that means we're going back to all of those business units and helping them increase their targets. All of a sudden, the dialogue changed in the organization when we made these changes. It wasn't Megan bringing to the organization, here's some great vendors that I've met, these diverse vendors from different backgrounds that I think you should meet. Instead, it's now the business unit coming to me and to my team and saying, we have this opportunity. What diverse or equity deserving vendors do you know about that could fit this opportunity? Because now they're looking for it. Now they're trying to find a way to meet their targets. Now they're trying to get involved in it. And it's really great to see that switch from the entire organization standpoint. And we also made a lot of changes to our processes, to the way we do business, to make sure that we're incorporating things. But I think the most successful thing has been making it driven from the top down.
Absolutely. It sounds like a lot of support and a lot of effort to share that knowledge and information throughout the organization. Leanna or Lindsay, if you'd like to go next, you're welcome to jump in.
So Megan kind of took the words right out of my mouth, I'll be honest. So similar to Megan, we kind of like, when we saw it really working out was kind of when we had it in the performance objectives. So we have targets we have to reach. And we saw that it was making a difference when it was linked to the performance objective. So like a top down. So that is one way how we started seeing it making a difference. But to add on to that, so we also saw, so what we do at BDC, we have like a champions network. So initially, because our program started back in 2019, we were very involved in the past with women entrepreneurs. So the champion network was originally for women, and we expanded that for all diverse groups. So we leveraged that across the bank to help us for supplier diversity in general. So it was kind of like having other people other than procurement going around speaking about supplier diversity. And we had our client diversity team when we were meeting with entrepreneurs, speaking both about like how they can help build the capacity for those entrepreneurs, diverse entrepreneurs. And then also that we have a supplier diversity program. So we were kind of trying to do more of a holistic approach, showing them that like we're supporting them on both aspects. So by being able to respond to bigger RFPs, but also by being there for them and trying to buy from them as well. So that's other things that we've done. We've seen a lot of success. So because in order to increase our spend with diverse suppliers, we need to know who they are. So by participating at events, getting to meet them, hearing their stories, hearing what they offer, even like talking to other organizations, talking about what we can do to increase. So it's like really what we saw is like when we kind of like didn't see each other as competitors, as corporates, like, so especially in like the FIs or the crowns, we always shared like, how can we help increase it? So that was also another way that like we saw it increasing by basically sharing our success stories and like learning from each other. That's what I could say. But yeah, Megan took the words right out of my mouth because it really did change when we saw it inside the, like from the top up, top down.
Very cool. I think you get right to the heart of what our forum is all about too, is about sharing information and sharing expertise and experiences. Lindsay, do you have any expertise or experience you'd like to share too?
Yeah, so both these women have shared a lot that is very consistent to my experience as well. There are some differences, obviously, working within a partnership, but ultimately everything that Megan is saying is bang on. You really have to have leadership buy-in, and I've seen some. I know of some peers that don't have leadership buy-in that have a much harder time, and when you have leadership buy-in and when you have the support and you have that, it really makes the job a little bit easier. Getting budget to go to events, to do what Leanne was saying with meeting people. The last 2 days, I was actually at the CCAB 40th Anniversary Business Summit meeting Indigenous entrepreneurs. So many entrepreneurs coming from all over Canada. So everyone knows the impact of having face-to-face time, right? But that costs money. That costs money for me being out of the virtual office or in-person office, and also obviously attending these events wherever they are in Canada. So that all comes from, again, leadership support. And then the other piece that both have touched on, but I'll go into a bit more deeper detail, is the army of advocates within your organization that are going to help share their passion and share in the heavy lifting of meeting people, of sharing contacts, I love when people from our practice from all over Canada will reach out to me and say, I just met a really, really cool entrepreneur that's doing amazing things in sustainability, and I don't think it matches with what we need in terms of procurement, but I thought you should know them. And I'm like, great. And I've said to many of the IWSCC suppliers, it isn't about, for EY anyway, it isn't about just supply chain and procurement. It's about me getting to know these people so that I can do whatever is in my power to open up my network to them. And, following on to that, it's not competitive, just as was saying. I would love to meet and I do, and meeting peers that are and sharing these suppliers. We might live in a very competitive market in Canada, or in Toronto in specific, within the firms and the consulting firms. But one thing we're not competitive on is keeping suppliers close to our chests. I would love to share everyone's network, or my network, with everyone I meet, and I try to do that. So having my internal army of advocates who are passionate about diversity, passionate about sustainability, really help share the message passed down from EY Global to accomplish what we want to accomplish within Canada.
It sounds a lot like we use that term, the army of advocates, and it sounds like one of the key steps to implementing a program and to finding success has been that transition from what many supplier diversity advocates and professionals out there might be experiencing, where they have to be a little bit of a one-person army. So expanding that army and getting that executive buy-in, getting that buy-in from your business team as well, sounds like a logical next step, but still a very important one. Really, I think it has a lot to do with my next question, which is all about putting the program into action and enabling it throughout your organization, as well as outside. So when it comes to your programs, how do you, we've talked a lot about defining success. How would you go about defining success, or how does your program define success for disabled business owners? And maybe how does it define success for internal team members as well? And let's, Lindsay, why don't you start us off, if you don't mind?
Sure. When I've been with EY for much longer than I've been in this role, and when I moved into this role, I was very used to metrics and very used to KPIs. And the biggest challenge for me was, what are my KPIs and metrics around this? Because anyone that goes into a supply chain role knows that it's not an overnight. There's a build that has to happen, and there's a look back on the year and see what you've accomplished. And so in the day-to-day, what does that mean for me? And what I've learned is, for EY anyway, and I know we're very unique, because where we can't necessarily do as much procurement or supply chain impact, what we can do is we can impact in other ways, so that my KPIs or metrics from an internal perspective, fueling my leadership support, is around that, that diverse spend, what is the dollar amount? Like, how are we making a difference? How are we turning the dial? But then also, how are we impacting individuals? What am I doing to connect the dots, whether it's connecting people, whether it's serving, again, from an internal community element, how am I helping others within the firm fulfill what they want to do through some of our programs, such as our EY Ripples program, which is a community give back program. Also, how am I impacting our entrepreneurial programs that we offer with EY? And I also offer, again, run programs in collaboration with IWCC, as well as the other diversity councils that we support. And what are those impact hours that we're producing and providing to the diverse vendor community that we're trying to support? So there is a very wide range of metrics, in my opinion. And again, I know that that's specific to my firm, and every firm or organization is going to be different based on what the operations of that company are. But I really have enjoyed wrapping my hands around all those different metrics and seeing how all of them can be, all the dials can be turned through the year, but obviously in very different ways.
Right. It sounds, we're turning dials and we're finding what works for us. So a lot like what we talked about so far today, kind of defining your own unique experience. It sounds like supplier diversity programs, working with so many unique individuals, kind of need to twist the dials and knobs in their own way to kind of define their success. Megan, we'll jump to you if that's all right. How has your dial and knob turning been, and how does OPG define success? You've talked a lot about metrics so far.
Yeah, I'm a data lover. I'm a metrics lover. For a very long time, I wasn't a data lover or a metrics lover because I was having to pull it all together manually, and that was painful. But getting a really good team in supply chain here, we have a team that has really helped pull together all of the data, and in doing that, it actually helped us change a lot of our processes, and that created a lot of other benefits too. So I mentioned we have on our corporate scorecard a target towards how much we're awarding towards equity deserving businesses or Indigenous businesses. We have spend targets. We have targets on our supply chain Tier 1 KPI as well. We keep track of how many suppliers we're onboarding in this space. In doing all of these metrics, we were able to create these badges that go on the supplier profile in our supplier systems. So in supplier registration, a supplier is filling out an ED&I questionnaire and attaching a copy of their certificate if they have an IWSCC certificate or another council certificate. And that applies badges onto their supplier profile. That then enables a lot of our other processes to give them priority. So if one of our buyers, procurement agents, or if any of our staff is searching for a supplier in our guided buying application, any supplier that is equity deserving and has one of those badges is going to come up to the top of their list when they're searching for those scopes of work. And that has allowed us to make sure that we are putting them front and center. If people through our guided buying platform start purchasing from one of these suppliers and make a procurement, they're going to get a nice little pop-up box that says, hey, thanks for supporting a women-owned business, or thanks for supporting this Indigenous-owned business, or this disabled owned business, or this whatever owned business it is. And that gives them a little feel good, and also helps drive right down to our front level staff that feeling of I'm supporting these corporate level targets, and even maybe this $5 widget that I bought today on the procurement portal. Another way we're trying to drive change is not by just influencing our own immediate supply chain here at OPG, but all the way through the industry. So that means we're holding all of our major prime suppliers accountable for having the same values that we have. Through our supplier relationship management program, we've ensured that all of the ESG proponents account for a significant portion of their performance scorecard. So we are asking our suppliers, how much are you doing when it comes to supplier diversity? What are your numbers? How much of that is directly related to Ontario power generation projects? And make sure you're submitting to us that subcontract data. So we're keeping track of data, not just at our Tier 1 level, but right down to the Tier 2 level, and we're holding them accountable for that. If they're not doing well in that space and they're coming in and having a conversation with our CEO on their performance, our CEO is calling them out on it. So again, right from the top of our house and right into our suppliers. And that means the suppliers leadership coming in and talking to our leadership and hearing how important this value is, and that they need to see significant increases and better performance in that area in order to continue having a good relationship with us. We're looking to drive change across the industry, and we're looking to work with partners who have the same values that we do. And this is one of the way that we're measuring that, and we're creating change across. So now we have, again, all about holding accountability, right? So now we have these suppliers that we're holding accountable to what they're doing, coming to my team and saying, Megan, we now need to set up supplier diversity programs. We didn't have one. Do you have any suppliers in the space that you know of that you can connect us to? And just like Lindsay said, all of a sudden you start becoming that connecting agent. It's all about that networking. Sometimes suppliers that we've met that might not be a great fit for OPG is a perfect fit for one of someone else in our supply network that we can then connect them to, and maybe they start supplying to us indirectly through a subcontract, or we've managed to connect them in a way that's not even going to support us, but it is going to help the industry. So that's, some of the ways that we've made changes both internally and externally a little bit in the industry to help support.
Yeah, you say some of the ways. It sounds like a whole lot of ways. It's incredible to hear about all the different things that are being, different strategies and different tactics that are being implemented to kind of connect opportunities in new ways. Leanna, do you have anything you'd like to add about the ways that BDC is defining success for your internal teams and spreading that information, or kind of the ways that BDC is defining success externally?
Yeah. So what we're similar to Lindsay is that what we do look at is our spend. So like what we have is like a target every year, and it's like a target that we want to reach, and then it keeps increasing every year. So we look at our spend, although we do see some challenges with that, because oftentimes what we see is that I could sign a contract today, but I'm only going to see it really kind of showing its benefits or its impact, not maybe this year, but within the next 2-3 years, because it's like a long-term contract. So that's why we look at spend. We look at the number of suppliers that we work with throughout the year to show like that as another way to show how many we're working with throughout the year. We're even thinking about maybe changing it to kind of show more our immediate impact. So maybe like probably look at how many mandates we've actually signed within that year rather than the spend. So it's like things that we're looking at. Another thing we've also tracked was the how many we invited to procurement processes. So like, because it could be that just to show the story from the beginning to the end. So like how many we've invited, and then how many have gotten contracts. So it's like we're trying to show the story and so forth. And another thing that we look at is even like sponsorship. So how many events do we attend? How many entrepreneurs do we meet? And then even the ones that we sponsor. So we're really like looking at diversity as a whole, basically. And then we have our client diversity team as well that looks at different metrics on how we support entrepreneurs, because we try to look at it on both aspects. So we have the one where we're looking at procurement, but then we can always show impact in how we're supporting our entrepreneurs so that they can increase their capacity to then able to be bidding on other organizations. So we're looking at it on both aspects to see how can we support, even if it's not directly BDC purchasing from them.
For sure. And, attending those events and being a part of the community, that's how the internal goes external, and makes new connections. You made a great point about the invitation process as well. Sometimes it really is just the difference about getting a seat at the table or the opportunity to participate in these contracts. Even that provides experience and more opportunities. And to your point, helps an organization learn about the ways that they're making connections, how many folks they're making connections with, and how successful those connections are too, which is just another great way to, I think Alex Yeglich put it best at the start of our forum today. Learning those lessons, what is the path to success, but a long list of different lessons that you've learned and different things that you've overcome or tried out with your community. And on the subject of making connections, I know we only have so much time together today. It's very regrettable. I love spending time with all three of you and getting the chance to talk more. But supplier diversity really is about making connections. And Leanna, you mentioned going to those events and being a part of the community. So my last question today is this, and Leanna, I'll maybe challenge you to start us off. Has your organization, has BDC, received feedback from the disabled-owned business community or the entrepreneurs with disabilities or just persons with disabilities that influenced your program? And how does that feedback get applied, or how do you learn from the connections that you make with the community?
Yeah. So we are a new member of IWSCC, so it's fairly new to us. So we're on the learning mode and like listening and trying to see how we can improve. We did have an accessibility strategy that we put into place. So we are working with different companies to help us ensure that we put accessibility languages within our documents, make sure that we have accessible equipment. So we're working even with employees. So we've had even mandatory training that we wanted to increase awareness across the bank on persons with disabilities. So we did a training and we actually asked BDC employees who had disabilities to be part of that training, to like speak and say how their experiences were and what they can do and how they were supported. So we're really in the learning mode. We're trying to improve as we keep going, and basically, we're always looking for suppliers to help us do this, and we've been working with a lot of great suppliers over the years. We even have one group, what they did was they recruited persons with disabilities and really tried to like work with them and then learned how, and like we've been constantly renewing their contract because it's been going great with them. So basically we're always open to feedback and we're always willing to learn, and we want to improve as we continue going. And we see it from our leadership that they support it, and we see it at all levels, and the awareness is all across the bank.
Yeah,
Leanne,
it's supplier diversity is always a learning journey.
Well, that's what I was just going to say, Alex. I was going to say, Leanna, you'll always be learning, and I think that's the beauty of diversity, right? And we as we conquer uncovering one diverse area, we find more nuances that we can do better at, and constantly learning. So, IWSCC, but be prepared to keep learning.
If we're not learning, we're not evolving. So I'm always open to it.
Exactly.
For sure. Lindsay, do you have anything to add about sort of is there a way that feedback from the community or those lessons from the community have really impacted EY's program?
Yeah, and everything that Leanna said is absolutely true, and constantly learning, constantly asking for that lived experience, right? And understanding from your network, either internally or externally, what are our blind spots? And what's one thing that I've been really loving is asking those questions and sharing that vulnerability, or sharing my own vulnerability of like, I need to learn more about this. I need to understand from someone else's perspective, like where potentially some of the blind spots were. And I've learned so much through my role working with the IWSCC on blind spots I just didn't have because I didn't have the same lived experience as others. So I think, I'm speaking kind of more from my own heart and from my own personal experience, but I think that, that symbolizes, I think, as my role within the organization. And I do encourage people to do the same. I think there are a lot of areas of diversity where people as humans, our initial reaction is to be fearful of saying the wrong thing, of doing the wrong thing. And I understand why we're fearful of that. And certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, where diversity has become more on the forefront, and we are an upfront and center, and we're really addressing it, they're so scared of not doing right by everyone. And where I try to bridge that gap with internally is to encourage people to constantly learn. And in order to learn, you need to ask questions. Obviously, you need to do it respectfully, and you have to understand, what is respectful to ask and how to ask it. But it's not until you ask questions and open yourself up to learn that you're going to actually get anywhere. So that's been a really huge part of my role that obviously isn't in a job description, but it's been really fulfilling personally and professionally.
Absolutely. I know even as a team member at the IWSCC, I am also always on that learning journey, always learning from new members of our community, new suppliers, and from our corporate members too, from all the folks that we want to work together with to create more opportunities. We're on our own journey too. Megan, do you have anything you'd like to add about how the ways that OPG is still on that journey?
Sure, I'll add a couple of things, but I'll try to keep it short because I know we're running low on time, and I do want to add lots of time for questions if I can. One thing we've been challenged on very recently, and we're always trying to get better at, is the transparency in which we're doing this work and talking about it and making sure it's very transparent. We do very publicly, in many public reports that we put out, talk about how much we're awarding or the spend in supplier diversity space, but we're not breaking it down. And I got challenged on that actually by a disabled owned business. And so we're going to have to look at that going forward. I can tell you that in 2023, we did $200 million worth of procurement with diverse businesses. I can tell you 142 of that was with Indigenous businesses, and then I can't break it down any further, or any of the other groups. But we know we have that data because I talked about how we have that data and we're assigning those badges to the businesses in our system. So why are we not breaking it down further and then having those targets in each area and making sure that every group has representation in our supply chain where we can? So that's one big area. We are updating our RFP criteria again based on feedback that we've received from businesses. And another thing that we currently have a member of my team working on is making sure that we have accommodations throughout our supply chain processes. So if we're having a proponents meeting and someone needs an ASL interpreter, if it's through Teams or through Zoom or in person, are we making sure that we're putting all of those things in place and that we have a very easy way for people to request it if they need it? So some of the changes that we're doing, but it's always a journey, just like both of my peers said.
Absolutely. And I think we've talked a lot about the IWSCC community. I know I've talked a lot about the IWSCC community so far today, and the way that that we love to support the suppliers that we work with, and that we get support from our corporate members. But I think another really important part of that relationship is the way that IWSCC can support our corporate members on that journey too. So I hope that we can continue to support the ways that you learn. I hope that you can continue to support the ways that we learn. If any folks in our audience today have any questions for our panelists, please pop those in the chat now. I suppose a little follow-up question that I have for you is, does something come to mind when you think of the ways that the IWSCC can continue to support you? Any takers? Any thoughts?
I would say just, keep doing what you guys are doing and bring us, bridging that gap between, the amazing diverse suppliers and corporate. I think the more opportunities to get together and to network, the better. I know it's difficult, and I know we have to be conscious of, geography and mobility issues. But I think, virtual platforms have really opened up such an opportunity for us to connect. And, and I also encourage others to get involved with other, the sister or brother councils, or sibling councils, we should say, to be inclusive, for to represent intersectionality, because I do appreciate that there are so many people out there that most people do not identify with one box. We are all unique individuals, and we all need to, connect and network across our intersectional identities. And that opens up a lot of doors too for opportunity and growth, personally and professionally.
Right. Leanna, Megan, do you have any thoughts on the ways that IWSCC can continue to support your journey?
So I agree a lot with Lindsay, what you said. And I'll be honest, because ever since COVID, that's when we had a lot more virtual events. And to be honest, it helped us in a sense that, because like Lindsay said earlier, to go to these events, we need the budget. So with the virtual events, we're then able to add on like other individuals, whereas like we only could send one individual to an event, because if it was in Toronto, per se, I'm in Montreal, so that takes travel for me as well as accommodations. So that's why by having them virtually, I can include other people within the procurement team and then even have them participate. So So just having these events, doing these roundtables, giving us the opportunity to meet the entrepreneurs, basically have those conversations, it's just that in itself is a lot of help for us as well.
I would echo
Excellent.
what both of them said, with the connections being one of the biggest things. Sometimes it takes multiple conversations, multiple meetings, multiple ways of connecting, whether it be in person or virtually, before you kind of find that right fit, whether it's with, a vendor as becoming a prime supplier for us, or perhaps we need to connect them with someone else in our network, and finding all those right places. And sometimes it takes many conversations to get there. And I think the more ways that IWSCC can help facilitate those conversations happening, the more likely we are to find success in all of these wonderful connections. I also would love to see more feedback coming back through the organization. We're trying our best to get feedback from businesses and how we can improve our processes, but maybe if they're providing feedback to the IWSCC too, and we can get that feedback and improve based on their relationships, either with other corporates or even their relationship with us, we would love to incorporate that into our improvements as well.
All right. Well, we here at the IWSCC will continue to do our best to support you, just like your organizations are doing their best to support disabled-owned businesses across Canada. So I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of our panel today, a part of the 2024 REACH Forum, and for sharing your expertise and your experience with our audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, of course, to our audience for being a part of this year's forum. With a few special announcements from the IWSCC, I'd like to hand things back over to Mr. Brad Broman, our Managing Director.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, we just have a couple of minutes left, but I don't want you to leave without hearing a couple exciting announcements. Before I do that, though, what a great combination of speakers, ideas, definitions of success, a lot of talk about starting with Marco, success doesn't have to look like everyone else. Kulbinder talking about be your authentic self. Again, back to Marco, shape your own story. Promote your lived experience, and figure out what your success metrics might be as you go forward. But most importantly, stay authentic to your real selves. And to the corporates, I love that they are measuring, that they are serious about the success of their diverse programs. And we want to be able to be that bridge between the supply community and to the corporates. Now, when I say that, I have to ask myself, what is our accountability? What is IWSCC's accountability? And frankly, I think we can do a lot better. We have had some deep conversations internally about how we do that bridge building, the programming that we have in place, and we want to do better at that. We've got some new programming in the works that we're going to roll out in the fall. Some of it I think you're going to be really interested in. Some industry specific stuff, a little bit more dynamic, and a little bit more opportunity for things like this, deeper conversations, better connections. So that'll be rolled out in the fall. We're also mindful of the Accessible Canada Act, where companies, corporations, and federally regulated employers are on their journey to accessibility. We want to, at IWSCC, not just connect with certified suppliers in the disability community, but connect with companies that do accessibility well, whether you're a service provider or whether you're a corporation, to connect on those that are on the journey, because that will open up a world of opportunity, I think, both for our suppliers as well as for the corporate community, and add value to the bridge building that we're talking about. We're also working with two diverse suppliers, one in the disability community, one in the LGBTQ community, to build a better way of communicating what the supplier communities have to offer to our corporates. To do that in an integrated, smart database way that will allow the corporations to track their interactions with the supply community, but also track spending and do those roll-ups a lot easier. So that's a project that's underway right now, and there'll be more announcements on that. Lastly, I have two special announcements from IWSCC that I want to roll out right now. The first one, I think it's going to come up here. We're going to introduce a referral program. We want to increase the size of our community and the engagement within our community. This is how our referral program is going to work. So if you're an existing certified up-to-date supplier within our community and you refer a fellow disabled-owned business or veteran-owned business to our program and they pass the certification, you, the referral, will receive half of your next year's fee to maintain your certification will be taken off. If you refer two, then it all comes off. If you refer three, it'll all come off, plus you'll get a credit for the next year, and so on and so forth. We really want to get some excitement going in the community, find those great disabled-owned and veteran-owned businesses that could make a real difference in our community and could add to the diversification of the supply chain that our corporates are looking for. The second thing I want to announce is something that's, I don't know if that's allowed on TV or on our thing, but we'll say it anyways. We're launching a program called NUDE. This is National Entrepreneurs with Disabilities Day. So think about it this way. We're in the middle of National Accessibility Week. We want to dedicate a day within National Accessibility Week to recognizing, to celebrating, to observing the great entrepreneurs, the persistent, fighting, hardworking, creative group that we work with every day. We want to recognize companies, we want to recognize suppliers, and we want to recognize allies. So we're going to roll that out next year. And in fact, we believe that NUDE will become kind of the umbrella for both our National Forum for Disabled Entrepreneurship, our REACH Forum, as well as these awards. So look for a little bit more information on that in the coming months as we get organized for REACH 2025 and NUDE. So with that being said, I want to thank you all for coming today. I want to thank our sponsor, BDC. I want to thank all the speakers, Margot and Albinder, Jay, Leanna, Lindsay, and Megan. I mean, really, really strong. Obviously, our guest speaker, keynote speaker, Marco Pasqua, and our opener, that was Alex Yeglich from the Government of Canada. So all of you and to all of the participants on the other side, thank you very much from IWSCC and the team here. And thank you to the team at IWSCC, by the way, for helping put this all together. It's been a great success. I can't wait to get your feedback on what we can do better for next year. But for now, we're going to sign off. And thanks again to our amazing ASL interpreter from Maple Communications. Thanks again, and we'll see you next year.